what is a fact you know off the top of your head, preferably disturbing, that you probably should know, not safe for work? Part 2. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. That when you have a headache because you're extremely hungover, it's because your dehydrated brain is shriveling and pulling on the membranes that connect it to your skull. Once I found that out, it's made all of my hangover headaches much worse just thinking about it. People dying often smell sweet, not in a sugary way, but much more in flowery way. It's the decompositions of the body already starting. It can also smell vaguely like alcohol, especially their breath. WD-40 rapidly destroys cocaine, rendering it chemically unrecognizable. If you ever need to transport cocaine, bring a bucket of WD-40 in case you get pulled over. 19th century murderer William Palmer's last words to the hangman who would take his life were, "Are you sure it's safe?" Charles Dickens called him the greatest villain that ever stood in the Old Bailey. Cows can create mummified fetuses inside of their uterus. If the fetus dies and is not retrieved, the body absorbs all the liquids and humidity from the fetus, and what is left is a tiny, dried-up, hard, solid mummy of a calf. The FDA didn't require full chemical characterization on its medical device submissions until 2020. A lot of people know that. There was a John Oliver episode about it. What you haven't seen is the resubmissions of old products that have been run since. Every month, hundreds of products have their authorization revoked because of unsafe chemicals. I've seen IV bags that can leach 1,000 milligrams of phthalates into saline that then get shot directly into your veins. That's over 250 times the daily tolerable amount set by the EFSA. In most cases, they've already been recalled, and the company wasn't doing anything wrong at the time, so there's no recourse. But millions of people were injected with cheap plastic, and there's no way to find out who. A person split in half by the stomach doesn't die instantly. It has some lastly moments of suffering. Source: a person was hit by a train and split in half in front of me. He took some time to die. Since I'm half Aztec, Mexico, I've learned of some uncomfortable facts which have been passed down from generation to generation, though I don't know how true this one is. During a ritual, Aztec kings used to bring some victims up the tall pyramid, Teotihuacan, so they may be sacrificed to the sun god, Huitzilopochtli. Typically, these victims were tossed alongside of the very jagged rocks and were usually found dead at the bottom. The priests would gather the bodies and cut them up for distribution to the people according to importance. So the king got the best piece, and his family and the other priests received some parts, etc. They inevitably ate these pieces as part of their ritual. Of course, they didn't just munch on them. They prepared them like any other meat and usually ate them with soups. Fast forward to the time when the conquistadors came from Spain. These guys show up not long after some ritual took place. Then the Aztecs welcomed them in and shared their food. You can figure out by now where this is going. These conquistadors ate the soup, so they inquired about what it's made of, and sure enough, they found out. Although eating human meat was a big no-no, the Spaniards actually enjoyed it. So when they inevitably conquered over the Aztecs, they ended up keeping the recipe of that soup. Instead of using human meat though, they used pork, since they said it tastes similar. We still eat that today. It's called pozole. During the Black Death, people would be so infected with the plague that the bubbos, those lumps, that you could hear them gurgling with bacteria. Ugh. In the 1700s, maybe a bit earlier, people would take the scabs of smallpox victims, cut their open wrists, and sew the scabs into themselves to inoculate against the virus. It actually was highly effective and one of the main reasons America won the Revolutionary War. But other people's scabs sewn into your own skin? Kinda effed up. A Jewish doctor treated Hitler's mother, the only person Adolf ever truly loved, while she was dying of cancer. He promised his eternal gratitude to the doctor, and even after becoming a pathological anti-Semite and later the Führer, he was true to his word and was adamant the doctor and his family be placed under protection from the purge. While some may think this is an act of genuine kindness, I just think about all the lives lost because Hitler never stopped to think that all Jews were capable of good and not just the one who happened to have been good to him because of immediate proximity. This month, I'm going to go into many people's homes to fix their internet, computers, etc. And yet I will be so focused on my task that I will miss the obvious signs of child abuse, drug abuse, and other similar nasty stuff. That my father raped and molested all of his sisters growing up out in the sticks in hillbilly Arkansas in the 60s and 70s. He was the oldest of 8 siblings. One of those incestuous relationships carried on way into adulthood. Sometimes deathbed confessions should never be uttered. Seal fingers. Primarily if bitten by a seal, but can also be contracted by exposure to seal bones or untreated seal pelts. It can cause cellulitis, joint inflammation, and swelling of the bone marrow. Fun fact, we still don't know why the F this happens, though since it can be treated with antibiotics, it's probably a bacteria of some kind. It takes 8 pounds of pressure to tear off a human ear, a force approximately equivalent to crushing a soda can. Not necessarily a fact, but oftentimes patients in hospice or close to death will start to give off a very putrid, pungent smell within 24 to 36 hours of death. That smell? Rotting organs. Ice is considered a rock in mineralogy. When a rock reaches its melting point, it becomes lava. Humans are 70% water, which means we are walking lava monsters. Using a dead animal to try and throw off body-sniffing dogs is a myth spread around to try and get people to trip up. If there's disturbed ground and some random animal 3 to 4 feet down, you can bet your booty that entire area is getting turned over. Rainwater sometimes leaks into graves, especially in Ireland, where most of the decedents were Catholic and thus, as per tradition, embalmed before burial. The groundwater fills the graves and coffins so much that the remains disintegrate and leak embalming fluid, which contains many carcinogens, into the groundwater. Local residents actually end up drinking bits of dead people through the tap water consumed. Fun fact. Dolphins throw around pufferfish like a volleyball just to play with them. They also get high off their toxins. Talk about a puff and pass. Hey now. When a pet dog has abdominal surgery, they don't keep the cone or something to protect the incision on. Some dogs will pick at the stitches until it reopens. This will lead to them disemboweling themselves, and often they'll begin to eat their own intestines. In ancient Egypt, the deceased bodies of beautiful and high-ranking women were left to decay for several days before mummification to discourage necrophilia by the embalmers. Ugh. Thanks to a forensic anthropology class, I can guesstimate the decomposing rate of a body based on climate and a few other factors like animals and maggots. Fun fact, bodies decompose faster than people normally think. For example, a body in a hot climate, whether that's wet or dry, can turn skeletal in a couple months. Daddy longlegs or harvestmen are not true spiders. They are in the arachnid family, but are more closely related to scorpions. Also, they only have 2 eyes and are harmless not because they can't break skin, but because they don't have fangs or venom at all. Well, I don't know if it fits here, but in 2004, went to this anime convention in a neighboring state. It was called Anime Friends. He was cosplaying as Kankuro from Naruto. This specific character is a puppet master. To mimic this, the cosplayer dug up a corpse and used it as a puppet. People would later notice the smell and report him to the cops. He was later arrested for grave digging and corpse violation, and he remained in prison until his death in 2011. Well, OP asked for disturbing, so here it is, I suppose. I remember hearing some dude, retired military, on a podcast talk about how fragile our electric grid really is, and if it ever went down, some 60%-ish of the population would die in about 2 to 3 months because nobody knows how to gather food or water anymore. In the 1960s, the CIA conducted a series of experiments known as MKUltra. They hypothesized that a combination of psychological torture and ridiculously high doses of psychedelic drugs could render an individual so susceptible to suggestion that they could be mind-controlled. The test subjects were not told they were participating in a CIA experiment. They had no reason to suspect they were repeatedly being drugged and tortured. Charles Manson and Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, were 2 of the many unsuspecting participants. We will never know the true extent of MKUltra because the CIA destroyed the records and files after an employee leaked the project's existence to the press. I'm a grain farmer, and we grow a lot of non-GMO products. We are losing the battle with weeds. Glyphosate, which is herbicide many GMO grains are engineered to be resistant to, is cheap, effective, and has an LD50 lower than table salt. In place of glyphosate, we have to use other products which are far more dangerous and have to be used in higher concentration and are always less effective. One product we used, called Prowl, is a fouled yellow paint and turns our equipment, well, yellow, and doesn't always work well. But the public's only concern seems to be with GMOs and glyphosates. The public doesn't understand that the alternatives are much, much worse. Knowing this bothers me a lot. Whales build up gases in them when they're dead. This makes them look inflated, and you can see somewhat large tracks in between the outer layer of skin. If a whale is cut, the gas is explosive, and the whale itself will be filled with so much gas that itself blows up from pressure, making dead whales extremely deadly.